Hello, welcome to another CleaveTech Tech Tip, and today we're talking interior design. No, haven't gone mad. This is about fitting an interior into your slot car body shells. How to go about it the right way, and how to make sure that it's not going to get tangled up in your tyres and gears in an accident. So we're going to put interior into our Atan Tesla shell. This shell's been painted and mounted for a JK C43 chassis. Now for racing in the UK, we have to have a three-dimensional driver figure inside, including head, shoulders, arms and steering wheel. I've seen all sorts of interiors or driver figures that people have made out of foam or paper or various other sort of things to try and make them as light as possible. But to be honest, you might as well use a vacuum-formed driver figure from an old body shell. So I'm going to take this old body shell here. It's actually on a 32nd car, but it's a pre-moulded driver. See, it's moulded actually into the body shell itself. And I'm going to cut him out of there and use him in my interior for my Tesla. So let's get cutting. There's my driver. I'm just going to cut him down a little bit more. I've got to leave enough of the arms and enough of the head and enough of the steering wheel just to give him some 3D-ness, but I can trim a little bit more off than I've done so already. There he is. I'm just going to go to town now with the details and give him some red seat belts. Like that. And I'll just give him some hand detail. There we go. So I've put my driver aside and I've got some paper that I'm going to use for the interior. I really like this paper. I came across it quite recently. It's actually the backing off of sticky backed custom labels that you get at the post office. And it's really thin. It's less than 4/100ths of a millimetre thick. And I like it because it's got grease-proof slidey stuff on one side. The other side is not so shiny, so you can stick your interior to it nicely or your driver figure to it nicely. And it's tough enough to not tear apart easily, but if it did get caught in something, you can actually still tear it. I've seen people use interior or old Coke bottle labels or fizzy drinks labels. Again, they're very, very light and flexible, but they don't tear very easily sometimes. And if they did get caught in something, it can be really difficult to remove those from gears or tyres, in an extreme accident. Now, I don't need this interior covering any more of the car than I need to. It just needs to stop you from being able to see the chassis or wires or anything else through the windows of the car when viewed from above. So this is going to have to go underneath and just about cover enough of the window so you can't see through. So I'm going to start by trimming it down to its maximum width that I need. So we'll just mark the approximate place with a pen. Approximate width needed is around about there. It's probably wider than necessary, but it'll do to fit it in the body shell. So just do a rough cut first of all. Now it can sit in there a little bit better and I can mark where I need to trim. So now that I've trimmed it narrower, you can see it fits into the inside the body shell here. You can see I've lined the back edge up with the back of the rear window here. So I'm lining that edge up there, and one of the long edges I've lined up just with the edge of the side window. And then if you can see more or less the outlines of the windows in the video, but when you get up close you can see that a little bit better. So I'm going to mark out the rough shape that I need with a pen on here, and then I'm going to trim it up to get it as small as I can but still cover the windows. There we are. So I'll trim that out. let's do a double check and see, does that fit in? That's not bad, not bad. I could probably just trim a little bit more in that corner just there. And where this rough edge is at the back, I'm just going to trim that off because I don't want it tearing there. So that now fits perfectly in that space there. It's just a fraction longer at the front, and I'll explain why in a minute. So now the interior is trimmed. You notice I've got a shiny side. That's going to be like the inside of the car. So that's going to be facing down towards the motor and so on. And the non-shiny side is actually going to be, you know, facing the top of the car like that. So I'm going to need to take my little driver figure, and he's going to be fitted onto the non-shiny side of this interior paper. So to fit him in place, I've just got some simple contact adhesive. Doesn't really matter what type you use. And I'm going to put a little blob on the bottom of him. Just tiny bits, like that. Decide where I want him to sit. So he's going to sit roughly in the middle. I don't want to change the weight balance of the car very much. So he's going to sit there. Just wiggle him around a little bit. So you can see there's now contact adhesive on the paper. He's jumping away. He doesn't want to go in, does he, this little man? There's contact adhesive on the little driver. So I'm going to leave that a couple of moments and we'll be back.
A few moments later.
So the contact adhesive is dried off a little bit. So I should be able to take my driver, push him together, and he's stuck down now. Again, minimal amount of glue. You only just literally want to make sure he's just sort of held in place on the piece of paper like that. Now, depending on the exact design of your body shell, depending on where this rear window comes, might affect the way that you fix your interior into your body shell. On this shell, with this Tesla, I'm able to trim the interior well away from where the rear tyres are going to be sitting inside the shell, which is a good move because, again, there's no chance of this interior hanging down, getting caught up in the tyres or the gears. If your rear window comes really wide out here, then obviously there may be a chance that your interior could get caught in tyres or gears. You know, if the back of the body were to take an impact and fold down slightly, there is a chance that the interior could wrap itself around the tyres and the gears, which is bad news. And then you'd obviously have to either remove your tyres, gears, or try and rip it out, but it could also cause damage to those gears. So I like to try and trim the interior as far away as I possibly can from where the tyres and gears will sit. And this Tesla shell allows me to do that very well because it's got a very narrow rear window. Now, before I tape it in, I'm just going to make sure that the edges are very slightly curved downwards because the body shell has a bit of a curve in it and I don't want these edges of this interior to be rubbing against the body shell. So I'm just going to make sure, just gently with my thumb and finger, just put a bit of a curve in that, just to say make sure that they're not folded down. So you can see there's now a little bit of a curve in that interior, just on those edges like that. Now I fix the interiors in with some of this strapping tape here. I've used it in my previous videos when I was talking about reinforcing a body shell. I'll put a link to that video on the screen now. But I also use it for fixing interiors in. I'll put a link in the description of where you can get this stuff from. It's the best stuff I've found at the moment. I'm sure there probably is better stuff out there, so let me know in the comments what kind of tapes you use to reinforce your body shells or maybe hold your interiors in. But I'm looking for a tape that's really sticky because it's obviously got to stay stuck to the body shell. It's got to be fairly resistant to sort of oils and chemicals and goops and things like that you'd find on the track and sort of stay stuck over a period of time. And this stuff so far has worked really well, but I'd like to find some even lighter tape if possible. as I said before, this has a very narrow rear window. So I can get away with just taping it to the rear of the shell across this little bit here. And again, there's no tape then in the areas where there's likely to be rear tyres and gears. So even if the tape does come unstuck a fraction, then it shouldn't come down and get caught into gears and tyres either. So I'm going to stick a little bit of tape on the back of this and we'll be back in a moment.
12 seconds later.
So I've stuck some tape. You notice it covers about halfway on the interior and halfway off of the interior. And then I'm going to line my interior up at the front and push it back and get it so that it sits in the middle, covering the windows, and it just covers that back window there, like so. And then I can just stick it down across there, just lightly, and then make sure that it does fold down into that little slot there, into the moulding of the body shell. And I use my fingers to just, or my fingernail, just to make sure that it's well stuck to the body shell. Now I'm doing this on a pretty new body shell, so it's all nice and clean. If you've used your body shell before, you need to give it a good clean like this, because if there's any oil residue or goop residue, or tyre dust, etc. inside your body shell, then again your tape or your interior is not going to stick very well. So really you should do this on a really clean body shell. You can always use something like some lighter fluid like this to clean up your body shell. That's probably the best stuff because it doesn't really attack the body shell, it doesn't really hurt it in any way. Most paints actually resist this as well. It doesn't really take the paint off, but there are other cleaning fluids available. Now if this was a different body shell, and as I say it needed an interior that was wider at the back to cover the windows, then I would have taped it slightly different at the rear. I would have actually run a piece of tape from the interior all the way over here and then stuck it onwards the wing that side, and I would have done exactly the same this side. So I probably wouldn't have stuck it so much in the middle. I would have stuck it with some strips of tape either side. So again, the same type of tape that way round, sticking it along there and along there, and then it's stuck down over the top of the tyres and the gear to make sure that it's perfectly stuck and it can't fold down at the edges and get caught in anything. But when you're having body shells like that with interiors like that, they are prone to getting covered in more grease and oil. So it is something to watch out for and make sure your interior is well stuck down at the back before the race. So the next thing is to stick it down at the front. Now some people don't bother. Some people don't stick it at all at the front and they just sort of leave it flapping around inside like that. And you can see that it sort of flaps down like that. And in most cases, that's actually not a bad idea. It can work quite well depending on how you do your lead wires and what chassis you're mounting this onto. I've also seen people stick it all the way around the front here solidly. They might even put some tape down the side so it's really solidly stuck in the body shell. Again, that's just adding a severe amount of weight to your car that you don't need, and it also tightens up the whole body shell. The whole idea is you want the interior to be able to move as the body shell flexes, and can you see that in the video there where the interior is actually moving, because it's only stuck down in one place at the moment. So it moves and it flexes, and it doesn't stop the body shell from being nice and flexible and actually performing well on the track. Now this Tesla's going to go onto my C43 chassis here. This was the one that myself and a team partner used in the recent ISRA Championship in the UK. We had a specific race for 24th cars. We did a team race with very similar rules to the ISRA World Championships. So we did an hour's team race and we managed to win it by a reasonable margin. The car drove really, really well. Excellent motor, built by Dave Harvey of 101. Fantastic. So I was very, very impressed. Chassis obviously built by me in my normal way. You might very well have seen my C43 chassis building guides. Again, I'll put a link to that playlist on the screen now. But my Tesla body is going to fit down onto here. Now, if the interior was left to be loose like that, then there is a chance that it could get hooked up in lead wires. I don't know whether you can see that on the screen there, whether you can see enough, but you can see here that it could get hooked up onto those lead wires and make a hell of a mess, and it could actually restrict the way the chassis moves and the way the body moves. So I don't tend to leave my interior loose at the front. I do fix it, but I'm going to fix it in such a way that still allows the body shell to be flexible. So I'm going to take my reinforcing tape again, and I'm going to cut a little length of it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 bits long. Probably don't need it quite that long, but then I'm going to trim it down again, so it's only a few little bits of reinforcing wide. Oh, I think it's time for some new scissors.
A few moments later.
Then trim it down lengthways like that. So it's only a few little strips wide. And then I'm going to do same again, just put that slightly to the side there of my block. I'm going to trim another bit like this. Again, a few strips wide like that. Get rid of that bit. So I've now got a couple of strips like that. I'm going to take one of the strips and cut 3 little bits off of the end. And I'm going to stick those 3 little bits in the middle at the back of this piece here. So by sticking that onto the back, in effect I've made that the back of the tape in the middle is not sticky, so it's only sticky now at the 2 ends. And what I'm able to do now is stick one of those ends to the middle at the front of the interior, like that. So I've stuck it on the interior up to the part where I'm just covered it over with that little bit of tape on the back. Then I'm going to fold it, and I'm going to fold it back like that. Then I can take my tweezers and I can stick that down at the front of my body shell like that. So you can see now there's a gap between the interior and the body shell, and that allows it to flex. It also keeps the weight of the interior slightly lower in the car, lower down, and it's more likely to stop it from getting caught in the lead wires from falling down too much. So I'm just going to line that up with the chassis and just take a quick look of how that's going to sit. So it just clears the lead wires. It's just above where the lead wires sit in the chassis. So that's perfect. If it wasn't, then I could always replace this little front bit here and make it a bit closer to the body shell. But I want it to hang down as far as it possibly can. And then the final check, flip it over. Does it cover what it needs to cover? Pretty much. You can see a little bit of the black lines there on the edge, a little bit of the black block through it, but it's within the spirit of the rules and it covers all the edges that it needs to cover, and that's a nice fit, and it's as light as possible. So there we have it. One interior fitted into a 24th production saloon shell, nice and light, and meets the rules. See you again soon.